So I've been noticing something lately and it's kind of been bothering me. I keep seeing business owners, smart people, competent operators, they're all making the same choice and they're choosing these kind of drag and drop, low code platforms for their AI automation. N8N, Make, Zapier, whatever, the visual builders. And look, I get it. When these tools first came out, game changing, a revelation. Suddenly you didn't need to hire a developer to connect your apps together. You could just click blocks around and kind of make stuff happen, right? But here's what I've been watching happen over the last year. And, it's these same business owners that chose the easy path. They're kind of coming back around. They're hitting walls. And when I dig into what's actually happening, there's this pattern that I keep seeing. They're paying what I'm calling the hype tax. And let me explain what I mean. So when these low code platforms launched, there's this like massive wave of excitement, right? YouTube was flooded with tutorials. Everybody's talking about how revolutionary it is, how you can build anything without code. The marketing is incredibly effective, and it should be because the promise is, well, compelling, right? So these businesses, they jump in, they start building, and for the first few weeks, maybe first few months, everything, it feels great. Moving fast, connecting systems, automating workflows, it feels like magic. But then, something shifts. The workflows start getting more complex and they need to handle like edge cases or they need error handling. They need to scale beyond 50 users to 500 and eventually thousands. And then this is kind of where the hype tax, it starts compounding in a way or snowballing, right? Because here's what I've noticed anyways, these visual builders, and I'm speaking from experience here. I used N8N extensively before making the switch. I used Zapier years ago. That's good for simple things, right? But the complexity, it doesn't stay in the workflow. The complexity gets buried in the platform itself. And what I mean, let me try to paint a better picture of what debugging looks like if you haven't done it, right? Something breaks at 2 a.m. A workflow that's been running perfectly for months suddenly stops and your client's leads aren't getting qualified anymore or their appointments aren't being booked. Money's being left on the table. And so what do you decide to do? Or what do I decide to do? In a visual builder, I might open up the canvas and there's all these nodes, I have to go look into the logs, see, if there's a log that exists even, try to figure out which specific step failed essentially. And if it's maybe a rate limit, a timeout, or the API change, there was some update that nobody told me about. Maybe it's something in the conditional logic, or even in the past, I've had nodes removed, right, from N8N entirely. And the biggest kicker for me is that the platforms, they don't really give me too much visibility into what actually happened. Like a lot of times I end up debugging in the dark, at least compared to code. When something breaks in code, I open up the error logs, there's a stack trace, and it tells me exactly which line failed and why. I can search for it, Google the error messages, have Claude Code help me. I can fix it in minutes, right? But that's not even the biggest issue I'm seeing. The bigger issue is what happens when these businesses try to scale. One of my favorite examples of this, I was talking to this agency owner last month. They built their entire lead qualification system in one of these low code tools, and it was great for their first 20 leads. Then they get 50 more, then 100 more, and suddenly the workflow just starts timing out, right? The platform couldn't handle the volume. And when they went to optimize it, they realized they built themselves kind of into a corner because that's what happens with these visual builders. Oftentimes, the performance considerations are to the wayside for the easy visual building, right? You're not thinking about the database queries. You're not thinking about the API rate limits. You're not thinking about how many times you're looping through data unnecessarily. You're just dragging blocks around, and the platform lets you do it because their business model is based on charging you per execution, per operation, per seat. They're not incentivized to tell you that your workflow is inefficient, right? In fact, for them, the worse that your workflow performs, the more money they can make, right? So when this agency owner called me and I looked at their setup, it was clear what needed to happen, right? They needed to migrate to code. But here's where the hype tax really hits home because migrating from a visual builder to code isn't like migrating from one database to another. You can't always export the logic. There's no convert to Python button. You kind of have to rebuild everything from scratch. Sure, I could give Claude Code the N8N template. I've actually thought about making an N8N template converter for Claude Code, which maybe let me know if that would be something you're interested in. But anyways, kind of have to build everything from scratch. All those hours that you spent digging around for nodes and all that investment, learning in the platform specific way of doing things, none of it transfers, right? That's the thing. Like you're starting over, and this time you got to do it, or I have to do it while the clock's ticking because now the system is actively failing and we have to get it back online, right? And this is what I mean by the hype tax. It's not just a monthly subscription cost. It's not just like the execution fees that keep going up as you scale. It's the technical debt that you're accumulating without even realizing it. It's the vendor lock-in where moving away becomes more expensive the longer you wait. It's the scalability ceiling you hit right when your business is starting to take off. Now, here's where this gets interesting, right? I had someone push back on this take recently. They said, but Nolan, not everyone can code. These tools democratize automation, right? And they're right. It kind of brings it to the masses, right? Sort of. The initial learning curve is definitely lower with these visual builders. You get something working faster if you're starting from zero, right? But, and this is what I keep trying to explain, the total learning curve is actually steeper. With code, it's hard at the beginning. You have to learn syntax. You have to understand the structure. You have to actually think about what the computer is doing. And side note, you don't have to do any of that now with Claude Code. Now you just have to talk to it and it can help you figure out the errors. But once you get past that initial hump, well, building the complex systems becomes almost easier than it is in like a visual builder, right? Because the code is explicit, it's portable, it's debuggable, and most important, it scales infinitely. A workflow that handles 10 users and a workflow that handles 10,000 users in code that's often the same code. You're not rebuilding anything. You're just running on a better infrastructure. In a visual builder, you're probably rebuilding it 3 different times as you hit each ceiling. And here's something I don't think really gets talked about enough. The visual builder approach is actually more complicated to understand than code. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. When I look at a Python script, I can read it top to bottom, line by line, like I'm reading a book. The logic flows. If I need to understand what happens when a user signs up, I find the sign up function and I read it. When I look at a workflow in one of these tools, I'm staring at a canvas, trying to trace lines between nodes, hoping the nodes are named right or labeled correctly, right? I'm clicking into config panels. I'm trying to remember what each custom name for each node means. I'm trying to figure out which branch and conditional logic fires under which circumstances. Like, I'm trying to read a story that's been scattered on post-it notes stuck to a wall of a psychopath. Anyways, sure, each individual post-it is simple, or each node, right, is simple, but understanding the whole narrative, the whole story is way harder than just reading a chapter in a book, right? So this brings me to what I've been doing differently. As you guys know, I made the switch entirely to Claude Code, so all projects I build are with code-based agents, right? Specifically Claude Code, or I also like GLM if you're looking for a cheaper Chinese model, which I've talked about extensively here before on the channel and probably sound like a broken record about, but it's generally been a game changer. And the difference is night and day. I'm building agents that can access my system. They're not constrained by what the integrations and the platform decided to support. If there's an API, I can hit it. If there's a library, I can use it. If I need to use something custom, I just do it, right? The agents are faster, they're more reliable, and when something breaks, which it will because, well, all software breaks, I can fix it in minutes instead of hours. But here's what really sold me on this approach, because I was building a lead qualification agent for a real estate business, and they wanted it to text prospects, qualify them based on specific criteria, check availability in the CRM and calendar, and book appointments directly to the calendar, right? In a low-code tool, this would have been dozens, if not hundreds of nodes, multiple error handling paths, rate limit management, conditional branching everywhere. In code, it's about 150, 200 lines, one file. I can read the whole thing in 90 seconds. And when they wanted to add a new qualification criteria last week, I changed 3 lines. It takes me 5 minutes in a visual builder. That would have meant opening the workflow, finding the right node, clicking into it, modifying the logic, testing each branch, hoping it didn't break something else in the process. And this is what I mean about code actually being simpler once you're past the initial learning curve. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying low code tools are useless. I'm not saying you should never use them. If you're a solopreneur, or if you just need if you're a small business or doing a side hustle and you just need something simple to connect, Facebook leads to your CRM, sure, a low code tool is probably perfect. The hype tax won't hit you, because if you're only getting a few leads in and they're just syncing to the CRM, probably not going to hit the scaling issue, right? But if you're building a serious business, you're getting hundreds of inquiries a day. If you're trying to scale to infinity, you're planning to grow, right? If you're trying to build something that can handle real volume, real complexity, the hype tax will catch up with you. And it has to me and to all these other people I've talked to, right? And the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to pay it, because the more expensive it gets, right? Because here's the thing about all that technical debt, it kind of compounds. Every workflow you build in the platform is another workflow you have to build later. Every integration you set up as well is another thing you're depending on for that platform to continue support for, right? Like I said, in the past, when I had different nodes removed, there was the memory, what was it? The Zod. One of the memory nodes that they removed, that screwed a whole lot of things up. My buddy Ken's node got removed, right? So if they don't support a node anymore, you're screwed. But I started thinking about this more in terms of like options, right? When you build in code, you maintain your options. You can deploy anywhere. You can integrate with anything. You can hire any developer to work on it. You can move to a different framework if you need to. You can optimize any part of the system. When you build in a low code platform, you're kind of trading those options for speed. And sometimes that trade makes sense, but most businesses don't realize that they're making that trade until it's too late. And that's really why I wanted to make this video, right? Because I've been seeing it too much lately. I keep seeing businesses that are just, hit this wall at kind of the wrong time. They've just gotten product market fit. They're just starting to really kind of scale up and get more leads in, like, tons, dozens of leads a day or whatever, or they're getting hundreds of users on their platform, like their market, whatever it is, right? And then their automation platform becomes the bottleneck. Like, they can handle the volume, but the software can't, which should never be the case. And that just makes like a terrible impression, because then to their new clients, they seem unreliable, and they might be stuck because migrating could be a 6-month project that they don't have time for, right? So what's the alternative, right? For me, it's kind of been this shift toward what I'm calling, right, proper agent architecture. You build agents that are actually AI native. They're not just workflows with the GPT nodes stuck in the middle. They're designed from the ground up to use language models for decision making, context management, for handling the messy, unstructured parts of the automation, right? And you build them in code so that you maintain full control, full visibility, full scalability. The learning curve, yeah, it could be steep at first, and you actually kind of have to understand how these systems work and a little bit of how code works. You can't just drag blocks around and hope for the best. Well, you can now at least talk to Claude Code and be like, hey, teach me this. And honestly, though, like, using Claude Code, that initial learning curve is gone, honestly. Now, I don't know what I'm really saying. Like, there isn't much of a learning curve to code stuff now. You just kind of got to spend a few hours and dive into it. But because you're not writing everything from scratch anymore, you're directing an AI to help you build it. You're describing what you want, and it's just generating the code, right? You're reviewing it, you're adjusting it. It's kind of like you're hiring a senior developer who can also research anything on the internet like near instantly. So here's where I land on all this anyways. The low code visual builder approach, it's perfectly valid entry point. It's how I started to learn automations, 4, 5, 6 years ago. It's how a lot of people start, but it's an entry point and it's not a destination. And if you're serious about building AI automation, AI agents for your business, or building them for other people, or installing them in your business, whatever it is, at some point you need to graduate to the next level, whether it's hiring a developer or learning it yourself with Claude Code or whatever. You need to stop paying the hype tax of these platforms. The marketing is always too good to be true. You kind of need to start building these systems. Now what I'm doing is I'm just building systems that I actually own, that I actually scale, that actually give me flexibility and the control that I need to grow. And look, it might sound self-serving coming from me because, I help people do this and install these in their business, and I teach them how to code with, how to build these things with code-based agents. Like, that's what I've been doing every day. But I'm saying this because I lived on both sides of it. I've built extensively with low code tools. I've hit the walls. I've paid the hype tax. And I've also experienced what it's like to be on the other side when your system scales effortlessly from start to thousands of users, right? When you can add new features in hours instead of weeks, when something breaks at 2 a.m. and you can debug it and fix it before you even finish your first coffee, right? That freedom is worth way more than the convenience of dragging blocks around and the cool visual of seeing everything cycle through the workflow, right? Anyways, that's what I've been thinking about. Another rant video for me. That's what I've been seeing, because if you're, you know, I don't know. But if you're dealing with this, you're not alone. Just know it's normal stage of the journey. The question is just whether how you want to deal with it now, when the migration is manageable and at the size it is now, or later when it's even bigger and maybe a crisis. All right, that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you disagree. I'm genuinely curious if there are counter arguments I'm missing here, but we'll talk soon. This has been Nolan. Links in the description. You know the deal. If you want to learn how to build it, school. If you want me to build it, my website. Do all the YouTube stuff, and thanks for watching. Peace.